Pop culture is obsessed with love, heartbreak, and complicated relationships. But how accurately does it actually reflect the underlying attachment theory? So today we're doing something a little different. I'm gonna speak from my experience as an attachment repair specialist, and we're gonna break down some popular movies and show and kind of point out why a lot of them either get it wrong or really oversimplify it. And we're gonna look at a couple movies, the first of which is Eternal Sunshine of the Mind, a movie I really enjoy, and the focus here is on avoidant relationships and the fear of intimacy. Another movie that's really relevant to today's age with the rise of AI and tech is the movie Her. I believe it came out in the early 2010s. And again, there's that same pattern of avoidant behavior, avoidance of intimacy or fear of actual relationships, and instead resorting to kind of digital relationships. And lastly, I'll talk about something it's not a movie or a show, but it's something that's been on the rise, especially since the pandemic. And it's a type of relationship called a situationship. Essentially, it's non-committed relationship, and it's different than polyamory or open relationship. And I'll go into why these kind of relationships, a lot of people with insecure, especially avoidant and anxious preoccupied attachment, often find themselves in these non-committed relationships. So starting with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, I think this is a classic example of avoidant attachment, maybe even fearful avoidant, kind of more of the disorganized end with kind of extreme behaviors, really intense avoidance. And if you've watched the movies, you see the main characters, Joel and Clementine, they are in this really intense, chaotic relationships where there's not a lot of neutrality and stability, which are hallmark features of secure relationship. And really the main premise of the movie is that Joel, the protagonist, the main character, and Clementine, they're in this intense, chaotic relationship, and Joel is finding himself struggling with intimacy and emotional vulnerability. And funny enough, I don't think we have the tech yet, but this in a way is an avoidant solution. What Joel ends up doing is, instead of working through the difficulties, the conflicts that arise within the relationship, his solution in the movie is to just entirely erase the relationship from his memory. And this really is a classic example of avoidant, preoccupied relationship, intimate relationships. So Joel really struggles with closeness and intimacy, especially emotional vulnerability. And, you know, in real life, most people don't erase their memory. They just withdraw or pull away, maybe disappear, break up entirely. And then Clementine has more of the classically anxious preoccupied attachment where she feels a lot, seeks intensity, and then she also fears of being too much for the other partner. And I just want to point something out, you know, even though we're talking about the movie and we're talking about pop culture too, a lot of people assume that, you know, most men are avoidant and most women are preoccupied. That is absolutely not true. In my work, I see as many men and women with avoidant or preoccupied attachment. I think there's something about cultural, familial, and so on overlays that do play in. You know, men typically do display less emotions and women are allowed to display more emotions. But in terms of the underlying attachment patterns, my experience, the distribution is actually pretty equal. And then coming back to the movie with Joel, he's displaying this classic avoidant behavior. When the relationships get too hot, too emotionally intense, the avoidant partner typically responds in this dismissive, shutting down way. And that's exactly what Joel does. He shuts down emotionally. He avoids reminders of the person, so he doesn't feel those emotions or have these activations. And lastly, he intellectualizes the relationships, and instead of trying to feel and process the underlying emotional content, and then ultimately just erases it from his mind. And of course, coming back to our biology, real life, we can't simply erase memories. I can see that somebody who does have avoidant attachment, this possibility may be very enticing, right? It's almost like you can, you know, in the same way surgery works, there's emotional surgery and you could simply just remove the negative or difficult feelings. That would be so much easier than having to feel these feelings and process and integrate them. You know, in my work, there's actually a really important message or content in those feelings. They affect your behavior. There's something they're telling you. If you simply remove it every time these feelings come up, you never learn the lessons. You never get that feedback. And feelings, whether you know it or not, tend to have a major impact. And they're really useful if you can actually interpret the data, what these feelings are about, what they mean. You typically tend to be more effective in the moment if you can integrate them. The second movie I want to talk about is Her. I looked it up. It came out in 2013. And I think it's timely we talk about it because there's this rise in avoidant attachment and avoidant behaviors in the digital age, especially with AI and all the different tech that's coming out now. And in the movie Her, this is much more complex and nuanced presentation of attachment behaviors. And again, this is just my personal interpretation of it. Theodore, the protagonist, the main character, what they're showing is that he actually does have feelings and is able to feel and express himself, but ultimately he struggles with real life relationships. And instead, he's able to find intimacy, form these deep connections with an AI. And I think this movie really encapsulates quite well modern avoidant attachment behavior. So somebody who is feeling intimacy and safety digitally, yet not able to do so in real life relationships. And then another piece of this is that AI fundamentally presents this distance, so it allows you to avoid vulnerability if that's something you're craving. And ultimately, this is a feature of avoidant attachment, is idealization and kind of creating a romanticized version of love instead of actually dealing with real life relationships and messy human experience and the emotions that come with that. And studies show that people with avoidant attachment are more likely to prefer texting over phone calls, using online dating instead of in-person dating, and just generally lean towards ways to create distance and space, avoidance, in order to actually separate from real-life vulnerability. And here's the thing, if you're noticing yourself constantly choosing ways to distance, and it may not be obvious in the moment, you sometimes have to look at patterns over months, years, or just even investigating how relationships play out, and you see that there's always a buffer or a way for you to withdraw and isolate, or almost like there's a separator between you and intimacy and closeness and connection. You might have avoidant attachment or have some avoidant behaviors. And the fix is relatively straightforward. You actually have to begin to turn towards closeness, towards feelings, which may bring about more conscious awareness of feelings, and it may be uncomfortable. It may also bring up some earlier memories or earlier unprocessed feelings, which is part of the work I do with many people that have avoidant attachment. And you also want to monitor and track in your own life whether you idealize people from a distance or almost create these bridges, these gaps to avoid intimacy, and see if you can begin to take some small risks, actually be vulnerable. It could be with friends, coworkers, or partner. And lastly, see if you can decrease the amount of digital escapism. So, for example, video games, and I don't want to tell people what to do and what not to do. Some people genuinely like technology. What I mean more is escaping into tech or digital pursuits over and against actual relationships. So, if you have a healthy balance, that's no problem at all. But if you're finding yourself largely isolated, see if you can find ways to decrease kind of solo time and actually recover and begin to fill up more of the time with relationships. And one of the biggest dating trends today on the rise is what's called the situationship. It's almost like a half relationship where neither party fully commits, or sometimes only one party is committed, the other is not. But why are these relationship structures so common now? We're going to look at it through the lens of attachment. And in a situationship, you usually have two parties stuck in a dynamic, and usually it's quite passive. So the avoidant partner is essentially saying, I like you enough, but I don't want to commit. So there's that bridge, that separator, like the previous movies we talked about, that creates this distance. So there's a built-in avoidance. And then for the preoccupied, the anxious party, they're trying to intensify and get clarity on the relationship. Oftentimes they find themselves committed to the relationship and wanting to advance and get closer, but they're willing to tolerate this ambiguity and non-commitment at the fear of losing the relationships entirely entirely, and in order to decrease their own fear of abandonment, they stick around. And this type of dynamic can continue. Some people stay in situationships for months and even years. Sometimes these relationships do shift and turn into committed relationships, but oftentimes what happens is the anxious preoccupied partner is left waiting for the commitment that never comes, and then the avoidant partner is enjoying this distance and ability to still reap the rewards of kind of relationship without having to really risk anything. And ultimately, neither party gets what they really want. And the real issue in a situationship, the avoidant partner is creating a relationship that's mostly in their favor on their term, and it's just close enough to keep the anxious preoccupied party kind of on the hook, hoping that the relationship will commit and work out. So how do you break free from situationships or shift the dynamic? You want to look at your underlying attachment behavior. Are you actively avoiding intimacy, or are you finding yourself attracted to emotionally unavailable partners? You also want to communicate early and clearly. Most people I work with that find themselves in these complicated unfavorable relationship dynamics actually know that this is coming and know what the other partner is doing, whether they're avoiding intimacy or creating these barriers. Yet they choose to ignore that, hoping that at some point later on they'll change their mind or the relationship dynamic will shift. Most of the time that actually never happens. So when somebody says they're not ready to commit, they don't want to, they're actively seeking casual relationship or situationship, they typically mean that. And ultimately, you want to look for secure, functioning partners, somebody who can be mutual and respond to you. So if you're looking for a committed, intimate relationship, other partner responds to that and is also looking for something similar and can meet those needs, your needs, and you can meet their needs in a way that feels right for both of you. So you have this win-win outcome. Pop culture often romanticizes and dramatizes insecure relationships, and they are really entertaining to see from a distance, to not be in them. You know, for example, to see all the different ways an avoidant partner, the length they go to create separation, to not be emotionally vulnerable. And then the way a preoccupied partner can get spun out and super activated, very emotional, trying to get closer, trying to get intimacy and intensity in relationship. But ultimately, secure relationships are built on mutuality, and they're boring because both parties, their needs are being met in a way that feels good. So if you were to point your camera to that, there wouldn't be a whole lot of drama. But the payoff is that in a secure relationship, both parties have way more time and energy. Instead of playing out difficult relationship dynamics, they get to use that energy to explore, discover, travel, experiment, do all kinds of things. So it's these higher needs and goals that you can really go after. So if you like this video, you can hit the like and subscribe button for more deep dives into attachment patterns, really any topic related to attachment. And if there's a show or something else you'd like to discuss, leave a comment below. I do read them and respond to them. And if you want to check out about my couples relationship work, you can go on the website mindfulattachmentcoaching.com. We offer classes, workshops, and one-on-one work. It's all on there. Thank you.